If we were to imagine the Earth in terms of human creativity, many bright spots would catch our eye, each denoting a concentration of human awareness. From these points, rays would emanate, linking one urban center to another, and marking humanity's inkling as to the scope of its Earth. This is Session 3, Ancient Greece, in a course titled History as an Evolution of Consciousness, and that is an aspect of a larger view, evolution of consciousness theory. In this session, we look at the ancient world's most inquisitive civilization, ancient Greece. Early Greek civilization is traceable to 2000 BC, when barbarian tribes established the city of Mycenae. In 1876, the German archaeologist Heinrich Schliemann discovered the ruins of ancient Mycenae and unearthed royal tombs and lavish palaces. Mythologically, we know Mycenae from Homer's Iliad and Odyssey and their tales of the Trojan War, gods and monsters, the beautiful Helen of Troy, and the murderous, adulterous, and adventurous lives of Electra, Mestes, Achilles, Odysseus, Agamemnon, and Clytemnestra. Mycenaean civilization reached its apogee with the conquest of Crete in 1600 BC, and after wars against Iron Age invaders from the north between 1200 and 1100 BC fell into decline, plunging Greece into a dark age with little evidence of the arts, writing, and mathematics. From its dark age, ancient Greece rose into its archaic period, during which Greek society re-established its structure, followed by its classical period, 750 BC to 323 BC. The latter opened on a countryside dotted with city-states, many of which had established colonies as far away as Sicily, France, and the Black Sea. But the defining characteristic of classical Greece wasn't its scope or affluence, it was its politics. In many Greek cities, oligarchies of aristocrats overthrew tribal monarchs. Disgruntled aristocrats, backed by slaves, peasants, and wealthy merchants, then overthrew the oligarchies. Called tyrants because they had illegally seized power, leaders such as Gelon of Syracuse, Periander of Corinth, and Polycrates of Samos were in practice wise and popular rulers. Under their leadership, trade, industry, and the arts flourished. Greek philosophy took root with the speculations of Thales, Anaximenes, and Anaximander. The greatest cultural shrine became the sanctuary of the oracle at Delphi, and the Greeks flocked to the Olympian Games. First held in 776 BC, the greatest strength of the tyrants, their benevolence, however, established the conditions for their decline and the emergence of a yet more open governmental form, democracy. By the 6th century BC, Athens and Sparta had become the dominant cities in Greece. Sparta, a highly collective society, achieved power militarily and maintained rigid control of its slaves, citizens, and conquests. At the same time, the absolute power of the Athenian rulers was on its way out. In 621 BC, the statesman Draco codified Athenian law, which limited the judiciary power of the nobles. In 594 BC, the statesman Solon reformed Draco's rigid, or draconian codes and gave citizenship to the lower classes. Under the benevolent rule of the tyrant Pisistratus, Athenian government adopted democratic elements of discussion and participation. His sons and successors, Hippias and Hipparchus, however, reversed these reforms. In 510 BC, this led to an uprising and a democratic victory under the statesman Cleisthenes, who enacted a constitution based on democratic principles. Empowered by a new social openness, Athens entered one of its most significant periods of artistic and intellectual achievement. But this flowering of creative expression was tempered by war as ancient Greece confronted its greatest military challenge. Across the Mediterranean, Cyrus the Great, king of Persia, overthrew Lydia and brought Greek cities in the coastal islands under Persian control. backed by Athens and Eretria, many rose against Persia in the Ionian Revolt. In 492 BC, Cyrus's successor, Darius I, put down the revolt and, angered by Athens' backing of the uprising, launched the Persian fleet against Greece. The fleet faltered on the rocks off Mount Athos, and Darius withdrew. In 490 BC, Persia launched a second attack. The Persian army massed on the plain of Marathon outside of Athens, where the Athenian army, outnumbered 3-1 by the invaders, won an overwhelming victory. Not about to give up, the Persians in 480 BC under Darius's successor Xerxes launched a third expedition. The Greeks made a first stand at Thermopylae, where, unable to stop the vast Persian army, the Spartan leader Leonidas and more than 300 Spartans and 700 Thespians fought to the death. The Persians burned Athens, only to have the war turn against them at sea. The Persian fleet chased the Greek fleet to Salamis, an island in the present-day Gulf of Saranikos. Under the Athenian general Themistocles, the Greeks feigned retreat and lured the Persian fleet into a narrow strait. Unable to maneuver, the Persian vessels confronted a devastating naval onslaught and, faced with heavy losses, scattered to open water. A year later, Greek forces overwhelmed Persian forces at Plataea and drove out the invaders. The unflinching leadership of Athens during the Persian Wars and the dominance of its fleet gave inspiration to the city's golden age of art, literature, and government. Pericles, who became head of state in approximately 460 BC, added new democratic ideals to the constitution that, among many reforms, paid for jury service and made it possible for the poorest citizen to participate. He also vowed to make Athens the most beautiful and culturally active city in the known world. The Athenians built theaters, libraries, monumental gates, and the Parthenon, the great temple devoted to the goddess Athena. The ideas of Plato and of his student Socrates stirred the Greek mind. The plays of Aeschylus, Sophocles, Euripides, and Aristophanes touched the Greek heart. Unlike Athens, which emerged from the Persian Wars bent to create the future, Sparta emerged as the military collective it had always been. Conflict between past and future was inevitable. With respect to the time, Athens saw the family and individual as more important than the state. Sparta, in contrast, saw the state as more important than the family and individual. To further the power of the state, the elite who ruled indoctrinated the Sparta citizenry in the most brutal way. For the greater good of Spartan society, babies not meeting the highest standards for health and beauty were ripped from their mother's arms after birth and heaved off a cliff. Boys deemed worthy of life were separated from their mothers at an early age to train with the men as warriors and learn to obey such orders as heaving a child off a cliff. Girls deemed worthy of life remained in a female caste that oversaw many of Sparta's daily activities. So rigid was this division by sex that marriages took place largely for reproductive purposes, and men and women fulfilled the intimate needs of lovemaking within their respective castes. Such a society nurtured little invention or architecture, enjoyed little painting, sculpture, or literature, and indulged in the plainest of diets, but it produced the most hardened soldiers in the known world. No Athenian could accept a Spartan way of life. Fleets battled on the Ionian and Aegean seas. Armies battled in the Peloponnesos. Sparta emerged the victor, but would not maintain its preeminence. In 403 BC, the Athenians revolted against Spartan occupation, restored democracy and independence, and allied with Thebes and Corinth. To counter, Sparta allied with Persia, but in 371 BC met defeat against the Thebans in the Battle of Leuctra. This established Thebes as the dominant power in Greece, which angered Athens, who turned around and allied with Sparta. While the great city-states were preoccupied with war and changing allegiances, a once insignificant part of ancient Greece rose to dominate all. King Philip II of Macedonia annexed colonies on the coast of Thrace and Macedonia, and, in 328 BC, won the decisive Battle of Chaeronea against Athens and Thebes. He formed a congress of Greek states, and at his behest, they appointed him commander of all Greek forces. Philip declared war on Persia only to, before he could march against Greece's once again enemy, die at the hands of an assassin. At the time, Athens' leading philosopher was Plato. Socrates, convicted of corrupting the youth with his teachings and forced to commit suicide by drinking poisonous hemlock. Among Plato's pupils was the Macedonian court physician's son, his name Aristotle. Among Aristotle's pupils was King Philip's son, Alexander. At the age of 20, Alexander, to be known as Alexander the Great, transformed the Macedonian army into the most powerful in the region. He leveled Thebes and, with the surrender of Athens, united Greece. He set his sights outward and conquered Anatolia, Syria, Egypt, and Babylon. He reduced the Persian capital, Persepolis, to rubble, and, driven to rule the known world, pushed into India. Alexander defeated a massive Indian army, mounted on elephants, only to turn back, fearful at what awaited them in the uncharted regions that lie beyond. Alexander's soldiers balked at being so far from home. The great conqueror returned to the Mediterranean and established Baghdad as the center of his vast Greek empire, struck down by what was probably malaria, but that is sometimes taken to be the flu. Alexander died at the age of 33. In his short life, he had made Greece the world's greatest power. Tyrants no less than Mao, Hitler, and Stalin have revered the Spartan way of life. In evolution of consciousness terms, what does the city of Sparta represent with respect to the city of Athens? With regard to the creative process, what does the Peloponnesian War tell us about the nature of human conflict? Must not Athens have come out the victor? With our look at ancient Greece, we complete Session 3 in our course on Civilization's Ascent from the standpoint of evolution of consciousness theory. Our course, titled History as an Evolution of Consciousness, continues in Session 4, Ancient Rome.